The Women of Ill Repute, with your hosts, Wendy Mesley and Maureen Holloway.
So, Wendy, we knew going into this podcast that not every episode was going to be a barrel of laughs, but this week is particularly challenging.
Yeah, we're going to talk about not a lot of chuckles here. We're going to talk about victimhood. I guess everyone's been a victim at some point of something. You and I are both victims, I guess you could say, and survivors of cancer. So we're going to talk about that.
We've also lost our jobs unfairly, me twice, and, more minor transgressions. Strictly speaking, though, a victim is somebody who's had something happen to them, who has suffered because of the actions of something or someone else.
Yeah, well, I mean, that kind of goes through is it annals of history? No, I guess it's not annals.
It's the annals. But if you want to go through the annals of history, we can do that. It's going to be a dark ride. I'm just going to tell you. Through the annals of history.
Through the annals of history. I mean, women are victimized for all kinds of reasons. We're smaller. I mean, I'm terrified of going into underground parking. And my husband, like most men, do not understand that I'm terrified of underground parking.
Well, but it is. There's a biological imperative. We are smaller. We're less powerful. And because being taken, kidnapped, raped, that's something that every woman, no matter how old, through the annals of history, has been afraid of. And it's also a weapon of, it's now known, it's a weapon of war, and women can't retaliate.
Yeah, well, and we're going to talk about that because we're going to be talking to someone who was kidnapped. She was thrown in a hole. Anyway, she's gone on to tell the story of other victims and kind of refused to be a victim herself. So it's kind of cool.
Our guest, if you're watching, you can see she's right here, Mellissa Fung, a journalist, a writer, and spent 5 weeks in a hole in Afghanistan, and then was released, and now has gone on to tell the story. I think we all know a little bit about the women of Boko Haram, but we don't have, their story is not being told by anybody else.
Yeah. So she was in a hole in the ground for 5 weeks, I think it was, Mellissa. We can talk about that. We can talk about your book, but Mellissa, she's focused on human rights reporting. She's now made a documentary. She's written a book about the Boko Haram girls, the hundreds of Nigerian girls who were basically stolen. They were children. As I said, one of them was forced to marry and was raped by her. She was 12 years old. She wasn't even menstruating yet. Yeah. They were kidnapped by the terrorist group Boko Haram, taken into the forest and forced to become child brides. Horrible.
The book is called Between Good and Evil. And though there's a lot more evil, Mellissa, than there is good, until the end. So this sounds like an obvious question, but after everything you'd been through, I would think that you would either feel compelled to go and tell this story or never go near it again. And you chose the former. Can you tell us about that, about why?
Hi, Wendy. Hi, Maureen. So nice for you guys to
have
me. Hi,
Mellissa.
Thank you. First of all, I love the podcast. I listen to it all the time when I'm walking my dog. And I just love hearing you guys laughing and talking to your friends and other amazing, badass women, So I really feel honored to be invited on.
Well, you're one of them. That's for sure.
I know. I think so. But to answer your question, Maureen, because there was a question there.
There was.
I decided to go and talk to we say victim, but the survivors, I like to call them, of Boko Haram, because, I felt like I was still suffering from PTSD from what happened to me. And I had access to sort of the best therapists, the best psychologists in the world when I came back from my experience. And I couldn't imagine these thousands of girls in northeastern Nigeria, a place where psychiatry is really, a novel concept. I don't know how they would cope with the aftermath of such trauma. And so I wanted to know what I could learn from them about how they were dealing with their trauma without all the help that I had, because I saw so many psychiatrists, so many therapists, and years later, I still struggle with post-traumatic stress, nightmares. And so that was my motivation for trying to tell the story.
Whenever I'm doing something difficult, I used to think of Adrian. You and I used to work together a few years back at CBC before you went to Afghanistan, after you came back from Afghanistan. And I used to think of Adrian Arsenault and think, well, she's been up for 3 or 4 days and she like carried it off into the woods and does all these stories. But then I don't know, I started thinking of like, toughen up, bitch, like to myself.
Oh, good.
and I think of you. I think of you and how you managed to survive being in that hole. So, and you did, and now you've told the story. But I guess I want to hear about that, but I don't want to make you relive all of that either. But what I remember mostly about when you came back after having been kidnapped and thrown in the hole, and, you wanted to go back. You refused to be a victim. You said to CBC, let me go back. I just want to go back. I want to keep telling the story. I don't want to be labeled as the victim. So what can you say about that? I don't think you took a package from CBC. You just left.
No, I know. I did it sort of, I did it wrong. Let's put it that way. I just quit. I quit because there were a number of reasons that I needed to leave. And the main one, I think, was that I wasn't doing the stories that I wanted to do. I felt like I needed to go back to Afghanistan and finish telling the story that I was telling when I was kidnapped. And that is the story of all the internally displaced, right? The Afghans who had to flee the fighting and set up all these camps all over on the outskirts of Kabul. And all the little girls there were not in school because they'd been displaced. And I just so felt strongly. And I guess it was guilt that my own kidnapping had sort of taken over that story. I became the story in place of a much more important story that needed to be told. And so I really felt like I need to go back and finish that story. And not being able to do it ate away at me. Like it made me angry. I kind of felt like I was labeled difficult, which I think I probably was. I don't know, Wendy, you might have heard things, but I think I probably was difficult because I was frustrated.
I don't think I ever heard that you were difficult. It was just that what I did hear was that CBC was saying she was kidnapped, she was tortured, we can't go through that again. And she's going to be marked by that, and we can't. So there was a little bit of the sort of corporate thing of, we can't wear it, we can't risk it, but I think it was also protective of you. I don't think they meant to be mean to you, but
maybe. But that kind of, I can see a parallel between the Boko Haram girls going home and being shunned with that. Rather than deal with the fallout, it's like, ooh, okay, we can say we're doing what's best, for Mellissa, but in fact, what we're doing is what's best for us. Sorry, maybe not a popular viewpoint, but...
Oh, no, maybe not a popular viewpoint, but I kind of felt that, right? It was a bit paternalistic, at least talk to me, right, about why you don't want me to go back, why you don't want me to do this, and then we can have a discussion, and then maybe I would have not been so angry, because I just carried around a lot of anger at seeing other reporters go to Afghanistan and cover the election, especially one reporter who I won't name. But it was really, if they had just talked to me every time I asked to go, and we had a conversation about why it wasn't a good idea corporately, I might have understood, right? But just the blanket no was very hurtful to me.
Yeah, I don't think that anyone said this about you. I never heard this anyway, but it just applies to so many women. The whole, well, she's difficult, but it almost not with you, but with women in general who are raped or horrible things happen to them. There's this sort of narrative that gets established, which is, well, she kind of deserved it. She had an extra drink, or she had a short skirt, and it's like it was her fault. Like,
and that's such a good point, Wendy. I'm so glad you said that, because I had also heard that I shouldn't have been at the refugee camp that long, that I stayed too long. And coming from male reporters who had been to Afghanistan, who had probably never covered that story, but judged that I shouldn't have been there, right? That I didn't know how dangerous it was. Well, none of us did. I was the first Western journalist to be kidnapped in Afghanistan since, I think, since the war began. So, I heard that from other people, right? That I had stayed at the camp too long. I was there for 45 minutes.
Oh, it's 45 minutes too long, Missy. But this is the narrative that we hear all the time. And it's not invalid, because I'm thinking of even the people that we've talked to, Wendy, like Lindsay Addario, who's a Pulitzer Prize winning photographer, war photographer, and she too was kidnapped. And who is it? Amanda
Lindhout? Yeah.
Lindhout, yeah, who was also held in Somalia for I think over a year. And then there's another famous American, I hate describing women by their hair color, blonde foreign correspondent was raped in a packed town circle, and I can't remember her name. But anyway, the point is, the narrative continues that women should not put themselves in these positions because, like we said when we introduced you, we're just too damn vulnerable. And yeah, it's paternalistic, but it's not entirely invalid. I throw that out to the floor. Discuss.
Mellissa?
Wendy?
Yeah, but what are we supposed to do? Are we supposed to go back to the day when you and I started in this business, which was, women's voices aren't authoritative enough, so just stay at home and do your Hillary Clinton baked cookies, I don't want to get in trouble either.
Yeah, no, I'm not advocating that either, but it is, we are more vulnerable. There's no getting away from the fact that we as women are more vulnerable than men, particularly in a war zone, and probably need more force or more protection. And that's just the way it is. It's you can't really blame anyone or blame the system. That's just part of the baggage that female reporters and correspondents have to shoulder.
I think Lindsay said this when she was talking to you. Women need to be in conflict zones because we can tell stories that men can't tell, or men wouldn't have the same, I don't want to say sensitivity, but when you're interviewing women who've been raped by Russian soldiers in Ukraine, or women who've been raped by Boko Haram, it's harder for a man to ask those questions, to do those stories, and to connect that way. In fact, in Afghanistan, women wouldn't talk to men about personal things, right? It's part of their culture. And so I think it's important that women keep doing this and finding ways to do it, whether that's having security with you 24/7, like we did in Nigeria. When I was there with the film crew, definitely. On my trips alone, I didn't, because I was bringing the girls out to talk to me rather than going into close to the forest. So I think we have to find ways to do it, because if women aren't there telling those stories, I don't think we can leave it to the men to tell these stories.
The women of ill repute.
So would your story have been told, Mellissa? I mean, I imagine that the fact that you had been kidnapped, like they were kidnapped, they were stolen. Many of the girls that you spoke to, and they, as Maureen says, they were shunned afterwards. What happened to you? Did that allow for like a stronger connection because of what you had been through?
I think for sure. And I'm just actually writing about that now, which is not in the book. But my first meeting with them, I was very open about why I was there. That I'm hoping to learn from them how to cope with the aftermath of trauma. And as soon as they sort of found out, they started asking me questions that other people have never asked me. Like, where did they keep you? Did they tie you up? Were you afraid of them? And those are questions that are hard for anybody to ask me, even now, right? But they were just so open about it. And I could be really honest. And it was sort of the first time anybody had asked me a question about my captivity where I felt comfortable answering. It was more like a sharing. In the book, I visit them in a village where a bunch of women are now staying, and they are all former captives of Boko Haram. It's amazing. And they gather around and they talk about what happened to them, and they support each other and they comfort each other. And I think that my relationship with the girls was more about that than a journalist going to interview them and taking out their stories. It was more of a sharing. They wanted to know what Afghanistan was like, what the hole was like, what they fed me. So, I was stabbed, right? And I still have the scars, and I showed them my scars. And one of the girls asked Mal, she had a similar scar on her right hand where her Boko Haram husband had stabbed her. And so she kept running her finger over my scar. And that was really kind of a moment where I thought, look at me. My life is so different from theirs, right? Here I am, a much older Canadian journalist. And here are these young Nigerian young women. And we share this huge thing. That's been a very, I wouldn't say cathartic, but it's been a really special gift, I think, for me to be able to speak freely. And I know that they would never judge, right? So, and I'm still very close to them to this day.
I'm sure it was cathartic in a lot of ways for them to see you as a successful Western journalist, but at the same time, it can happen to you. The same, I shouldn't say fate, but the same experience that befell these helpless children in Africa happened to you, a similar experience. So that can be both reassuring and also terribly frightening. I want to ask you, what is their relationship with men now, men in general?
It's hard because they are now seen as being tainted by Boko Haram. And so they want to try to find a husband. That's going to be hard for them. And their mothers all want them to get married off. And a couple of them have boyfriends. One of them actually got married and had a child when she came back to her village. And then the husband's mother said, you can't stay married to her because she is Boko Haram wife. So they split up, and now she's got the child on her own, and she's back to living with her mother. So it's this cycle, and I don't know how to help them there. I don't.
I find this whole victim thing, them refusing to be seen as victims, even though their entire village, sometimes even their family, sees them as willing victims, perhaps, or just victims who must be shunned because that's what the religion says, or whatever. But I remember when you came back and you talked about being in the hole, and you were still kind of in charge, like you were still refusing to be, you were in a freaking hole. And there were guys who were coming to see you, but you were still trying to stay in control, which is, I guess, what they're trying to do. Are you in control now? Has writing a book, has done this documentary? Has it helped?
I don't know. I think it's all a process. It's all part of a process. I felt like I was being defined as this former hostage for a very long time. And this is when I was still at the CBC too, right? That this happened to me and I'm going to be identified by it for the rest of my life, probably. I think what I decided to do is embrace it and say, this happened to me. I got the scars. It's part of who I am now. And so I do have this special kind of a superpower that I can talk to people like Asmao, Gambo, and Zara in a way that no other journalist can in the whole world. Well, maybe, I'm not the only one. There are others, but
the blonde reporter whose name I can't remember. But yeah, it's a fairly unique, regrettably, but unique perspective that you bring. I want to throw something out. I watched The Woman King, which is actually based on a true story of a 19th century female tribe in Africa. I can't remember exactly where. They were warriors, and they were hired to protect the king of their tribe. And I mean, obviously, it was made into a Hollywood movie, so a lot has been romanticized. But one of the true aspects of it was this tribe of women warriors could not marry, could not have families, could not have children. They had to devote themselves entirely to fighting, because as soon as you put yourself in a maternal position, you are weak. And, as harsh as that may seem, it made sense. in a way. And so therefore, to be a good warrior, a successful warrior, you have to put away feminine pursuits. And that resonated to a certain extent. I mean, in that culture, I could see that. But all the good things that make us female, the nurturing and the love and the compassion that we bring, are also things that make us vulnerable. There's no question there.
We have birth control now, though.
Oh, that, yeah. I'll go after them with my packet of pills.
Well, we can only get pregnant when we want to get pregnant. And then the men, they wear like baby Bjorn, and they're out with the strollers and everything.
But this is all good. This is all a step in the right direction. Men should be more I don't think any of these Boko Haram guys are running around with a baby Bjorn on them. But these are steps in the right direction where we sort of spread the love and spread the vulnerability. I'm sorry. I'm just up on a soapbox here.
I just wonder now, like if you go on social media, which is very hard to ignore, try as we might, there are all of these people who are sort of embracing victimhood because they had a headache or they had a varicose vein or
snowflakes. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just crazy. It's like, it's super in to be, I'm a victim. Listen to my story. Does it like make you crazy?
It does.
I mean, it's sort of the other side of the story, but it's like narcissism. It's ridiculous.
It is narcissistic, I think. Just get on with it, right? Like you have a varicose vein. Get on, it's not the end of the world.
So what a hangnail.
Yeah, hangnail.
I know. Yeah, I know. Once you've witnessed, and I think, Wendy, you and I went through this too, because once you've been told, given a cancer diagnosis, and in my case, and Wendy's to a certain very dire one, after that, it's like, you know what? I can handle anything now because I've looked at my own mortality. And as you put it, Mellissa, it's a bit of a superpower to have been down the dark annals of history.
It's annals, Maureen, annals.
I'm going to say that now. I'm going to keep saying annals of history. No, but you guys have both been through it, right? You've both stared death in the face. And I think once you kind of accept that this could be it, which I had to in the hole. I didn't know if they were going to come and shoot me one day. I really didn't. So I was okay. Like I kind of thought to myself, this is it. This is it. I made peace with myself, I guess. And then once you've done that, nothing really can bug you that much.
Can I ask you about your husband? You're married to Paul, aren't you? Yes.
Yeah. Paul Workman, CTV. He was a big deal. I worked with him 1,000 years ago.
He is a big deal.
Yeah.
But when I've been through what I've been through, whether to difficult childbirth, cancer, my husband, it was so hard on him. I don't know if he's ever recovered. And there's that, so I'm just wondering how, it's a personal question, but how's it been for you two in the wake of everything that you've experienced?
I think it's harder on me because he's been going back and forth to Ukraine since last year.
Oh, God.
Right? And so
what is it with you two?
It's awful. And I totally admit I'm terrible because I automatically go to the worst place. A situation comes up or he doesn't respond to a text. He's in a frigging war zone and I'm, where are you? Then I think he's been bombed, right? Then I think he's been kidnapped. Because that's my automatic reaction.
Of course.
And so the poor guy, not only does he have to cover, he's in the middle of ducking bombs, but he's got to respond to my texts.
It's kind of it's a wonderful love story, actually. I mean, you got together with him in Afghanistan. It's a beautiful love story. And then you got kidnapped and he fought for you. And I noticed, what was the dedication to Paul, who makes me believe that anything is possible. It's kind of lovely.
It is lovely.
Yeah. So tell us about what has he made possible for you?
All of this. I couldn't have written the book without him. The support. He's my first reader, right? Like, so I'll send him a chapter and, he'll come back and say, oh, I didn't like it. Or, and he's brutally honest if he thinks that I could do better. And so I couldn't do any of this without him, to be honest.
Did you send him texts in the field and say, so what do you think of this? And he's like, I'm busy. There's bombs dropping.
I try not to bug him with this stuff when he's, but just let me know you're alive, right? That's not asking for much. But, I've gone back to Afghanistan about 7 times since coming out of the hole. And Not a single time has he ever said to me, I'm going to worry, don't go, or like, why do you really have to? He's never questioned any of these crazy assignments that I go on. And so I'm not the same. I'm not the same, right? Like, really? Do you have to go to Ukraine again? Do you really have to? I think I'm much more nervous about things, about him going on a crazy assignment, as opposed to, I don't think about it myself, right?
So can you laugh now, Mellisa? I know that you said that you're thinking of taking up surfing again. When I told you that I love certain forms of surfing, I'm going to pretend that they're not ones that were invented 50 years ago. But can you laugh? Like, is there light in you? Like, you seem okay. I mean, I can't imagine having survived what you've survived. But do you have chuckles?
There's joy in your life, I would think.
There's joy in my life. I think I have to work harder to find more of it, because I think the last 2 years have been really hard on me. Afghanistan, falling back into the Taliban, and then trying to help women get out. I was writing this book at the same time. I had to stop writing the book for a few months and focus on helping the women get out. And, as a result, I think I'm on blood pressure medication now. So the last couple of years between the book and Afghanistan, Nigeria and Afghanistan, I just feel like I've had to really work hard to look for joy. But I think, Maureen, you'll appreciate this. Paul bought me a keyboard during the pandemic, and I started playing the piano again. Terribly.
I do the same, just as bad, I'm sure, if not worse.
You're probably way better than me.
No. And you'll never know, because I can't play in front of anybody. But I do play for myself, and it's incredibly therapeutic. It's almost like a transcendental meditation. Not that I can do that, but it can be. It's a wonderful thing to do. And I took it up. I took up piano right after I finished chemotherapy. I took up piano and golf, and I'm terrible at both, but I do it anyway. It's not.
You're better than me playing golf.
What about the girls? They're women now, but they were girls when the Boko Haram girls. Is there a possibility of them finding joy? I mean, it's a broad question. I mean, I tend to think education is the best possible way out, but that doesn't even seem available to them.
It does. Boko Haram, doesn't that mean like Western education is bad? Boko Haram, it's like, it's crazy.
And its name,
it's forbidden.
What of them? What possible hope do they have to find joy in their lives?
Do you know what? I tried to help them finish school. We found a private boarding school that took them. And after one semester, the principal said they're not keeping up. So they'll have to repeat. And then they really were not keeping up. So they were asked to leave the school. And so we found another boarding school in Yola that agreed to take them. And it was the same thing. I got them a private tutor, outside of classes, get them up to speed. And I think I just realized that school is not, it's past them. They should have been graduating from high school. So now I'm just trying to figure out what they want to do. And, Asma has taken up sewing. And so, I'll get her a sewing machine. Gambo wants to sell children's clothes in her village. So she'll go buy wholesale at the bigger cities and sell them in her village. Zara wants to open a little corner store. We've seen them places like Africa and Asia, just a little shop that sells SIM cards and bubblegum. And so hopefully I'll sell enough books to help her do that, because I'm really adamant that any royalties from the book go to help the girls, because it's their story, right? It's not mine. So set up an account where Kabir, who's my wonderful Nigerian journalist colleague, will help dole out the money for them as they need it, because this is the only thing I can do for them now, because school didn't work.
It's lovely to see you again, Mellisa. I'm hoping to see you soon, and thank you for doing this, and thank you for talking about the theme and not just about the book, because I think it just makes a lot of people think about a lot of things, and your heart goes out to these women, and you are the person to tell this story. They were girls when it happened to them. Now I suppose they're women, but it's lovely to see you.
but you're telling their story. And so on that note, the book is called Between Good and Evil, and it's out. And now you know where your money's going if you go buy a copy. Get the hardcover copy. Don't stint.
Well, with the two of you, I was pretty sure that would happen at some point.
Thank you, Mellissa. And we managed to have a few laughs. Amazing. We're funny, and we smell funny too. Thank you, Mellissa, and good luck with everything. You're a remarkable, a brave woman. You're not a victim.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been fun.
Talk to you soon. Bye.
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 Hey. Well, that was fun. I mean, I didn't think it was going to be fun, but it was fun.
Yeah, no, I used to work with her, and she's a really good friend, or has become a really good friend of my really good friend, Louise Penny. And it's so important. Like, she was like thrown in a hole in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
And now she's written this book about Boko Haram. It's, I don't know. I think you got to make an effort, and then you never know how it's going to turn out. She was great.
It's also daunting. I mean, I remember, again, using the cancer comparison, and you've been through it as well. People didn't want it. People don't want to talk to you about it because they don't know what to say. Anybody who's had big tragedy, like, if you've lost a child or whatever, people stay away from you because they don't know what to say, and it becomes worse. And it's like, you got to rip the scab off, and no, don't do that. You have to rip the bandage.
Yes, rip the bandage off. Do not take Maureen's medical advice.
Don't listen to me.
No, I think it's fascinating, and to hear her talk about how no one always makes the right decisions. Like when she left CBC, she didn't do it the right way, and she was made to feel guilty, and she did feel guilt, and did she handle it right? Anyway, it's just so human. And now, she's still suffering from what, like, I'd have offed myself. I can't even imagine.
I don't know, Wendy. I don't know. You're braver than you say you are.
I don't know. It's hard to imagine ever being thrown in a hole. Like, who can imagine it until it happens? But yeah, I'd forgotten that she was stabbed too, I guess.
Yeah.
Anyway.
But she says she finds joy. She's got a good marriage. She's got great friends. She's got her creative, and what she's doing for these women, the Boko Haram girls. I think of them as girls because they're, 20, is amazing. And obviously it's bringing her joy too. So it was a pleasure talking to Mellissa Fung.
Yeah, and it was nice hearing her fight back about how women got to be there. Yeah, even if we get kidnapped. So it was, Anyway, it was lovely. I'm so glad that we did this. So thank you.
Yes. No, well, thank you.
Women of Ill Repute was written and produced by Maureen Holloway and Wendy Mesley, with the help from the team at the Sound Off Media Company and producer Yet Belgraver.